Alrighty, we are here today with William Blaine, whose books sound like they are an interesting exploration of language, which I have to admit is one of the best things ever. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on at the moment in the midst of all this craziness.
Yeah. So just to avoid confusion, I go by Will.
Will, oh, so
Yeah.
sorry.
So if you type William, I mean that's officially my name, I suppose. But just to avoid confusion
Will,
with me and other relatives, I go by Will.
Got it.
Because there's like 50 million William Blaines in the world. So
Really?
my father is William Blaine, and so and he lives in the same city, so it's avoids
That's
confusion. Yeah. So everybody calls him Bill, and they call me Will. So
that's almost even more confusing.
Well, it helps when you're searching for my book and all my stories and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what I've been working on lately is a story series called Wildly Inappropriate Stories for Children. So these are all stories, the short story format. They're typically designed for parents and kids, probably more mature kids. Not that's the inappropriate part. You don't want in stories that are for influential children. You don't want them to read them these. So and all these stories are about the things that we do not want kids to do. So the first story, Vlad and the Vast Beach, is about a little boy that wanders off from his parents. His mom takes him to the beach, and he wanders off and has a little adventure on his own. So that's like one of parents' worst fears, is having their kid wander off. I mean, for myself, my daughter is now grown and
so she can wander.
It's a funny story because I can remember when she was growing up, I would always insist that whether we went to the grocery store or to the park or wherever, that she holds my hand, just because I didn't want somebody to snatch her up, So she was like, 10, 12 years old or something like that. She's like, Dad, do I still have to hold your hand? And I was like, yes, absolutely. She's like, Dad, I'm 5'8". Nobody's going to snatch me up. And she was big for her age, but but I still had the same fears as a parent. I mean, even though she's 5'8" and nobody's going to be taking her, obviously, without a fight, I just, you fear that your child's going to be harmed or snatched up from you in some way. So this is playing on that fear, Vlad and the Vast Beach. So he goes to the beach, is having a good time, and suddenly he's not there. So he meets some unsavory friends and has a little adventure on his own. So it's a good story. It's a good story, and most of the story rhymes. It's fairly short, so it's kind of in the style of Dr. Seuss or something like that. So it's
fun. Now, what made you want to write stories for children who shouldn't necessarily read these stories, but probably do anyways?
So okay, I'll give you another story. I have a friend that has a boy that's 5 years old. So I have another story. It's not published yet, but I've already got a bunch of stories written. I just haven't published them.
Sure.
It's called The Brat with a Bat. So it's basically this kid gets a new baseball bat and he goes around his house smashing things. But that's okay. So also at the end of all these stories, they have a lesson and a moral to them.
Right.
So they're not. It's not like endorsing this behavior.
Because
Right. But at 5 years old, you don't really have that filter. You're like, it was within 5 minutes of finishing the story, he had a stick and was going around hitting things in his house. So I was like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is why they're wildly inappropriate for children. These are all ideas that children that are in any way influenced by what they read or their surroundings should not be feeding their minds on. Absolutely not.
But of course, then the children who aren't necessarily influenced by that might not actually need the lesson.
Well, no, that's not exactly true. Not exactly.
Okay, true.
Sure. And some of the lessons are they're kind of sarcastic and things like that. It's not necessarily good lessons. It's just like a moral of the story type thing or something like that. So my first story I wrote, last June I spent a month in Europe, and I ended up in Croatia. So on the plane ride from Croatia to Ireland is where I wrote this story. I was sitting beside a little girl. She was about 11 years old, something like that, and I'm writing on my phone, in like a Google Doc or something, and she's looking over my shoulder, kind of like seeing where the story is going to go. So at 11 years old, these are really good stories. Kids are interested in them. They're not young enough to where they're going to be overly influenced, but they do find them entertaining.
Fun.
So I would think maybe a 9-year-old, maybe an 8-year-old, depending on their emotional maturity, I suppose.
Sure. Ooh, well, and at that point, they're beginning to understand sarcasm as well.
Yes,
so
yes, and they're written, and the stories are written with words that maybe a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old wouldn't understand. So the vocabulary is not geared to kids that are easily influenced.
Right, sure. Which then brings up the question of how do you go about crafting that language? Because that's a very particular set of things, of criteria that you have to worry about for your readership.
Yeah, and I'm careful about things that I write too. So in Brat and the Vast Beach, there's part of the story involves some gunplay. So most people, that's like a terrible thing that they don't want their kids to have anything to do with it. So instead of being explicit about it, I just use a line like "a shot rang out" or something like that, not focusing on that. It's included in the story, but it's certainly not focused on that. But some stories just flow. And like Brat and the Vast Beach, it was just a story that just kind of like flowed out. I was on the plane for an hour maybe, and wrote the story in about that time. And I already had the ideas for it. I've got. Well, the whole idea is to have a short story series, with wildly inappropriate stories for children. And I have about 20 ideas or so.
Oh, wow.
And I've written probably 10 stories already completely. So it's, most of them just flow. And with having that many ideas geared along the same thing, with reflecting on my life experiences and my being a child myself and raising my daughter and having nieces and nephews and all of my friends and things that have kids, and I don't have any grandkids yet, but at some point I'm sure I will. And these experiences are going to play themselves out over and over and over again. You're always going to have kids that are wandering off. You'll always have a kid that is just takes things a little further than he should, or like the Brat with a bat. My next story coming out in a few weeks is called Sticky Fingers from Jam. So it's so everybody that I've known has gotten up before their parents and decided to make themselves breakfast, but their culinary choices are typically not what you would expect. So the little kid gets up early and decides that he's going to eat blueberry jam for breakfast, and he does so and uses his hands to do it. And then, of course, all around his house is evidence
touch.
That's exactly right. Exactly.
Yep.
So, and these are again based on things that many people have lived. And this story initially, when I was young, I grew up in a farm in West Virginia in the rurals, and we didn't have very many neighbors, but my uncle lived behind me, and we lived in a house in front. And then in order to do my chores in the morning, I get up about 6 o'clock in the morning and walk to a barn, which is about a quarter mile behind the house. Well, in order to do that, I had to walk past my cousin's house. And about 6 o'clock one morning, he emerged from a cornfield entirely covered from head to toe in sugar. And he was not wearing any clothes. And he tells me that he had made himself breakfast. Now, I was like, I don't know, 9 or 10 at the time. And I was like, I didn't think anything about it at the time. In hindsight, being at the age I am now, thinking back, I was like, I would have had so many questions.
How the heck do you get entirely covered in sugar?
Exactly. And I was also wondering now, what in the world does his kitchen look like? And what was his parents' reaction? If he has that much sugar on himself, how much is on the kitchen and in the living room and wherever else he was.
That's a lot of sugar.
It is a lot of sugar, yeah. But he was very proud of himself. He was a little kid, maybe 2, 3 years old, something like that, So he was very proud of himself, very proud of himself. But kids do that all the time.
Yeah.
I can remember having discussions with different young ones about wanting to eat cake frosting for breakfast. And like, no, we're not going to do that. Well, why not? Well, then you start having to reason out, why can't you have cake frosting for breakfast? Or why can't I eat jelly for breakfast? Or, just...
Those little pieces of logic that don't quite fit in the child's brain, yeah.
Right. And again, I don't really have good reasons for that kind of thing. Like, why can't you eat jelly for breakfast? Well, it's just because my parents never let me eat jelly for breakfast. Well, that's not really a good reason, is it? I mean, it's after all, it's a fruit, right? And maybe a little bit high in sugar, but also Captain Crunch is high in sugar. So what are you going to do? So I did not make a habit of doing that, mind you. I was a fairly responsible parent, but
okay.
I don't endorse doing that either. But it's a thing that happens, and it's very relatable to almost everyone.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I still have so many questions about the sugar, though.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's just amazing. Like, why would you decide to cook yourself breakfast without any clothes on? I mean, I get that he's, a young child, but still, that one, I mean, okay.
I think until most kids, both my daughter, she didn't like to wear clothes until I made her, and then when she did wear clothes, it was like a tank top and shorts.
Yeah.
And I think that was, I don't know how she does now. She lives in Maine now, and I live in Ohio. But
sure,
until she moved out, she wore a tank top and shorts. Summer, winter didn't matter. So clothes were not a big thing.
Wow.
Yeah, right. So I think most children, particularly under 5 or so, they really aren't really big on clothes, and that's probably good because they do tend to
go through them.
They stain them and tear them, and I was very rough on clothes myself. I can remember my mother complaining about the number of pairs of jeans that I ripped or destroyed in some way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. My brother was exactly that way. I was the exact opposite. Oh. I got really freaked out if my clothes were ripped or dirty, and it was like.
Yeah, but I can totally relate to that. The destruction that children can do is incredible.
And just that gap, that logical gap, like, oh well, you can't do this because never mind.
Oh yeah, that reminds me of another story. So I was my daughter was an only child, so when she was little, I'd bought her a baton. So she was out in the backyard playing with the baton, and we had about a couple acres of property, and I was going around back, and I said, "Baby, make sure that you don't leave that baton because I'm going to be mowing the lawn here in about a half hour." "Oh, Daddy, I won't forget."
Oh.
I was like, "All right." So about a half hour later, I was going in the backyard, and first thing I saw was that baton laying in the middle of the yard. So I shut the lawnmower down and picked it up and walked into the house, went to the kitchen. She's sitting at the kitchen table having a glass of iced tea, and before I said anything, she's like, "Oh, Daddy, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And trying to be the good parent, I was like, "Becky, what would have happened if I would have hit that with a lawnmower?" And I'm thinking, anything would be good. Like, it could have hurt your lawnmower, or maybe somebody could have got hurt if you would have hit it and it shot out from underneath of it and could have injured somebody. Anything like that would have been great. But she really pondered this. She's like, "You could have got me another one." And I was like, I am failing as a parent because basically, she got anything she pointed at. I've got a decent job, and she, I like getting my daughter whatever she wants. And so she just went to the store and she pointed and she got it. So, up until that point that was her life experience. She got whatever she wanted to. So I was like, I can't keep doing this. I can't let her be unappreciative for the things that she has. Mm-hmm. So I thought about it for a few weeks, and I was like, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to start giving you an allowance of $5 a week, but I'm not going to buy you toys anymore. I'll buy you whatever else you need. But as far as toys are concerned, you can spend your money and you can buy whatever you want. So she just didn't have an endless supply of getting anything that she wants. She would have to be responsible. And it also taught her to manage money a little bit.
Right.
Well, the first thing I found out after instituting this new model is that she was tight. She did not like to spend money at all, and which has really served her well as she's grown up. But we would go to the store and she would beg. I mean, she would be like, "Daddy, please buy me this or buy me that." And I was like, "Well, you have your money. No, that's okay. That's all right. I'll keep my money." So it was several months later, and we had gone to a Renaissance festival where everybody dresses up in costumes and they have all the kind of stuff. So she's like, "Daddy, I figured out what I want to spend my money on." And I was like, "Okay, I got to hear this," because we had been through this many times where we'd gone to the store and she would be on her hands and knees begging me for whatever it was, and I would say, "Well, go ahead and buy it." And she's like, No, I'm not going to spend my money." So she's going to spend her money, and she's like, "Well, what are you going to spend it on?" I want a sword. And I'm like, "A sword?" And she's like, "Yeah." So I'm thinking like a Nerf sword or something like that. That's a little bit odd. And she's like, No. I want a sword, like a double-edged, sharp steel sword. And I'm like, "Absolutely not. No, you're not getting that." And she's like, "Dad, you said that it was my money and I could spend it on whatever I wanted." And I was like, "Well, that's true. I did say that." And I, as a parent, I was always very, I don't know, some people would consider it liberal, but I didn't like making a lot of rules about what you could do or what you couldn't do. If you wanted to jump on your bed, jump on your bed. But if you break your bed because you're jumping on it, you have a broken bed. I'm not buying you a new one.
Right.
So it's taught her to be responsible. I think most, well, I don't know, maybe some kids need rules, but my daughter was, I think that she worked better with the whole principles type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Take care of your stuff, and you have it. You don't need me to tell you what to do. Just think a little bit, and you're able to reason these things out. So that was the exception with the sword. I tried to think of every scenario in which she or one of her friends could be impaled by this sword. So I was like, whenever your friends come over, the sword doesn't come out of the sheath. The second one of your friends gets a sword, your sword is gone. Nobody can take a broom handle or any other implement and use it as a sword. I was thinking about every scenario in which something bad could happen. So I made all these rules, and she was well aware of them. So when she was probably 25 or so, and she's like, "Dad, you remember all those rules that you had about the sword?" And I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "I regularly violated them." But she always was really quiet about it. Whenever friends or anything would come over, and nothing ever bad happened. And I certainly do not endorse anyone letting their child have a steel sword or a sword of any kind, for that matter. That is, I can assure you that is a bad idea. Bad idea.
Wow, that's great. I mean, swords are, being a fantasy type, I get the sword thing.
I know. I like it too. Right.
That's impressive. Yeah, okay then.
And I asked her years later, I was like, "Becky, why did you want a sword?" And she goes, "Well, I just wanted it." And she had that until she moved out. She had it, and it was up in her bedroom.
Wow.
She had it for better than a decade. Yeah.
Wow. Well, okay then. So all of these stories are like the new version of Grimm's fairy tales. Well, if you choose to go out into the woods and get attacked by a witch, that's your problem.
Right. That was the intention. My whole goal is to have all these stories and put it in a collection, kind of like Aesop's Fables or something like that.
Right.
And I'm going to title it Will Blaine's Big Book of Wildly Inappropriate Stories for Children. So it's going to be a collection, all of them, and I'm working with an illustrator right now. So when I get the big book, they're going to be illustrated stories and things like that. So. Yeah, right now they're not illustrated. They're just kind of like they have some pictures, some of them, but for the most part, they're just the text. Mm-hmm.
Fun. But I imagine, because you said they were rhyming text, but that's always entertaining. They
are. Would you like me to read one of the ones I got? This is something that is not published yet.
Okay.
I'll put it up here. I was on a podcast the other day and read this one too.
Ooh, fun.
I did. This is the story, The Brat with a Bat. So
Okay.
this is the kid that gets a ball bat. It says, "What is this that my eyes see? Slender, metal, so shiny. I'll take a swing. No one will care. It won't hurt if they're unaware. To swing feels good from where I stood, in the middle of my living room floor. I heard the whoosh of the wind as the bat would descend and make contact with our front door. It left a dent in the door, and much like before, I continued to swing away. It was not that I planned, but the bat left my hand because my grip had gone astray. The bat flew through the room and continued to zoom because I had opened the door. When it landed, it smashed a large pot, then it crashed to a table Mom used to adore. I picked up the bat, then calmly sat to survey the damage I'd done. I looked all around and imagined Mom's frown, but then again thought, that was fun. I tossed the bat in the air because I didn't care if I broke a thing or two. Look over there. It looks like a chair. It seems to be made of bamboo. I took a big swing and then heard the ping as the bat made contact with wood. The wood didn't move. I'll have to improve and swing harder in all likelihood. As I gave it a whack, it developed a crack, then the leg fell onto the floor. Impressed with my style, I developed a smile. It snaked wryly, much like before. What to do now, I said to myself as I stepped slowly into the yard. I swung as I walked, but then soon I balked. I saw a goat who was a diehard. The bully would butt anything that's clear cut, so I decided to give it a try. He stood on hind legs and gave me a gaze. As I swung, I gave a war cry. I heard the sound of the ping, then thought, poor thing, but then looked at the end of my bat. I stood there amazed that Billy was not fazed by the violence of the impact. My bat sustained damage, that much is true. Billy dented the end of my bat, but he didn't care. For sure I could swear that he enjoyed the combat, which is true, incidentally. I used to raise goats when I was growing up. They are very stubborn, particularly the boys. Continuing, I continued on foot. I needed input to figure out what to smash next. I saw a small tree. It was right next to me. I focused my muscles and flexed. On the branches was fruit, the red glossy sort. I swung my bat hard, but I was too short. I threw my bat up, that is, up in the tree, and down came an apple, as fresh as can be. I threw the fruit up and then took a swing. The apple was smashed over everything. I was covered in sauce and sticky to boot. I should have thought better of smashing that fruit. But that didn't matter. I was okay. I was off to smash something, without delay. I didn't get far until it caught my eye, a brown paper object that wasn't that high. Should I just ignore it or give it a whack? I walked all around and planned my attack. Now, the queen was quite vicious, and so was her brood. No one remembers when she was in a good mood. In her domain, she eagerly sat, just waiting for a youth with a metal ball bat. I struck the first blow, and with hornets in tow, the savage queen from her nest started to flow. They covered my body from head to toe. From assaulting me fiercely, the queen would not slow. I looked back at my house in my agony. Then I saw my dad jump from my balcony. He ran with great velocity to come to save his progeny. I was screaming and crying as my daddy arrived. He carried his girl away from the hive. The queen was still angry. She continued the attack, putting large welts all over Dad's back. As we jumped in the creek, she brought to a halt the horde of mad insects and their vicious assault. By the time we got home, my mom had arrived. We told her about the incident with the hive. Though she felt badly for my affliction, she was still very angry with the damage I'd done. Dad spoke to Mom softly in gentle hushed tones. Then he walked to the deck, made of old cobblestones. He started picking up pieces of smashed pottery. Then I knelt by his side, feeling camaraderie. I was stabbed to the heart, I have to confess, when I saw my daddy cleaning up my big mess. Though it hurt me a little to kneel by his side, I did it quite proudly, my sorrow implied. They taught me a lesson, the queen and her crew. Because of my daddy, I've changed my worldview. In time, Mom forgave me, and I'm glad of that. Because of them, I'm no longer a brat with a bat.
That was lovely. Also, oh, hornets. Oh, not something you want to mess with.
Yeah, well, there was an incident when I was about 7 years old. We were going blackberry picking on the farm where I grew up, and I got into a nest of hornets, and they got stung about 14 times
Oh,
by them. It was terrible. It was one of the
oh,
worst incidents of my life, I think. But
yeah,
it was,
they're vicious.
yeah, they're relentless, certainly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Ooh, yeah. I've done enough research on them to know you don't mess with them.
Right, right. Yeah,
That was great. Very well done. I really liked that.
yeah. Most people like it. It's just getting my name out there and getting people to know what I'm writing and stuff like that. So I've got like I said, about 10 stories already written. I just have to. I work full time, obviously, and
Sure.
since the Corona thing, I've had a little more time on my hands, and mostly I've been doing podcasts apparently. So
Yeah.
I have
Yeah,
to
things are a
actually work
little,
publishing books.
sure. Things are a little wonky at the moment.
Absolutely, yes.
At least there's time for writing.
Yeah, yeah, and I was something that I actually really like doing. I tell my friends all the time. I was like 50. I'm 50 years old, and I don't know what I want to do secularly with my life. I've got a good job and stuff like that, but it's
Sure.
just, it's a job, but it's not really what I envision myself doing. Something that makes me happy and that I like
Mm-hmm.
doing and look forward to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, ooh, what fun. Okay, so you've got 10 of them written. You've got Vlad and the Vast Beach published, and the next one, of course, is your Brat with the Bat that you just read,
It's
which
gonna be Sticky Fingers from Jam next.
Sticky Fingers from Jam. Oh, okay, that'll be fun. And then what next? Are you gonna just keep going with all of the individual short stories? Or are you gonna focus on your larger book?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with the individual short stories first. So I'm going to publish all of them, and they'll be published first. And then when I do the book, I'll probably have some that are not available in individual format. But for the most part, they're going to be all together, and then they'll be illustrated as well in the
Right.
large.
Yeah, and what's that process looking like?
Well, I've got an illustrator that I'm working with, and that's the biggest thing is getting the illustrations written and then we got to work with a copy editor, which
Yeah.
happens to be my wife. She's a copy editor.
Oh, very
And,
cool.
So we got to fit the stories. And, that's another thing that I didn't really appreciate when I first published the story, because I did the initial ebook by myself and didn't have anybody helping me whatsoever. And it's okay, but I did not appreciate at the time the importance of having a copy editor. They don't just check your spelling and grammar and all that kind of thing, but they also give attention to the aesthetic of how the text fits on the page, and kerning. Kerning is like the space between letters and stuff like that.
Right.
Just if you didn't know, and that's important because the aesthetics makes it easier to read or more pleasurable to read, like
Right.
how the lines break and how the sentences fall at the end of the page, and how they should go at the end of the line and all that kind of thing. And it does make it a much better experience to have somebody that gives attention to that detail. I'm not that person. I write stuff and I've got these big ideas and I write them down. But as far as the whole copy editing process and stuff like that, it's nice to have somebody that gives attention to that kind of stuff, because it makes for a better reading experience.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a completely different set of skills than actually writing the book.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Very fun. Ooh. So for people trying to get into this world of writing these fun children's stories that are probably slightly irreverent.
I would say that's a good description. Yeah.
Are there traps that they should avoid?
I don't know about traps. I think I think that a person has to be exceptionally I can't think of the word now. Need a dictionary. But somebody that has a lot of ideas and they flow freely, because I think people can get bogged down into writing the same thing over and over again. So my mind is always flowing. I've got lots of ideas going all the time. When I was dating my wife, I always have lots of these ideas, and when we were dating, I was like, when I retire, I was planning on retiring early, and I was like, I'll have to have some type of supplemental income. And I was thinking about growing radishes in my basement. And
Oh.
she's like, oh, really? And I was explaining why. Because radishes go from seed to maturity in 28 days. So you can get 12 crops every year. Yeah, so they're really quick. Yeah, so that was my thought. I can grow radishes, and what brought this whole idea on was it was like wintertime, and I was looking at the grocery store for radishes, and they didn't even have them. I mean, you couldn't buy them, period. So I was like, well, if I grow them in my basement, I can get with the local grocery chain or something like that and sell them, and I could probably make $1,000 off each crop, 12 crops, so that's $12,000 a year. And they're organic radishes and all this kind of thing too. And I calculated the square feet of my basement and how many I could get there. And so anyway, she's like, well, that sounds interesting. And I said, yeah. And the only thing is, we'll have to fill the basement with 3 inches of compost. And her response was, we got to break up. But after that, I was like, I just need, because we'd broken up several times, and I was like, we can't keep doing this because of my ideas that I'm having, because I have, frankly, lots of ideas. And I was like, so let me just say this. I'm going to break my ideas into stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4. You really don't have to worry about anything until stage 3. Stage 1 is like all the ideas that are like constantly going through my head. Stage 2 is when I start like gathering information, talking to people about it, and stuff like that. With stage 3 is when you develop a prototype. That's when you worry. So until something's prototyped, you don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And completely appropriate.
Right.
Oh, wow. What fun. What fun. It has been a huge pleasure talking with you this morning, and I'm really interested in that book. It's really fun, which is great because I don't often get to read and review children's stories, so I'm pleased to be talking with you. Is there anything else you'd love to add? Writing related, not writing related, world events related, not world events related?
Oh, I've got lots of ideas, but I'll spare everyone. But if everybody could follow me on Instagram, it's Curious Mind of Will. That's my business, so it's Curious Mind of Will. Gmail, if you have comments that you want to send me an email about, you can do that. Follow me on Facebook. It's Will Blaine. My name is just my personal account if you want to join that. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm probably going to be in other formats too. I'm tossing around ideas about being on TikTok and things like that. But I don't know. That's kind of a youthful type thing. I don't know how well that would be received, but you never know.
I've never actually. I see it all over social media, but I haven't done any research on it, so I have no idea what this is actually all about.
Well, I thought I've been looking at different apps. Like I looked at Snapchat, yeah, and I thought
I think so.
That just the format didn't seem like it would be conducive to what I'm wanting to put out there. So I just found it kind of irritating. I found Twitter kind of irritating. I can see where people would want to announce things on Twitter, but I don't know. It just didn't seem like what I was looking for.
Sure.
So,
well, there are different forms. Yeah, different things for everybody.
Right. So my author page on Amazon is www.amazon.com/authors/Will Blaine. That's WILLBLAINE. Yeah. So everybody always misspells my name or says William Blaine instead of Will. Yes. Or something like that. So it's kind of hard to make sure you get that differentiation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll be sure to put all of the links in the description box below. You can find them there. Otherwise, have a absolutely fantastic day. Enjoy the spring type weather.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a nice day.
Yeah. We're not quite full on, perfectly warm days with sunshine yet, but we're getting there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really enjoy this time of year. Just it's not really hot yet, but it's certainly not cold.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, have a fantastic day, and thank you so much for doing this.
All right. Anytime.
All right. Bye.